Revolution Radio proudly presents live from Phoenix, Arizona, the Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear about on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, nutrition, and conspiracy facts regarding your personal sovereignty. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
And a very good evening, Tuesday, the 23rd of April, 2013. Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody there in the chat room. Be sure to ask your questions of the guest tonight if you have any questions, if you're in the chat rooms or the event page on Facebook, if you're registered there. We had a little joke going on today because we had 357 people registered for the show this evening on Facebook, and I thought it was pretty funny, 357 Magnum. And so we kind of all made a joke about it. But anyway, my guest tonight is George McClure. He's going to be returning to. He did another show with us within the last year, I want to say, and. George is phenomenal, so we're going to dive into some subject matters. And as usual, I have some commentary that I want to mention. First of all, if you want to look at any of the links for George McClure, you can see them in the chat room. The producer has put them in there. And he is also linked up at thetruthDenied.com. You can listen to the show on the player at thetruthDenied.com if you wish, or you can join the chat room at freedomslips.com and listen to the show live there. So very welcome to all of you. I also want to thank you for some of you who have been really paying attention and helping us out at The Truth Denied with some donations. I want to thank all of you who have been contributing to renewing our host sites and our domain sites. We really, really appreciate it. Up until now, we have been self-supporting, and of course, we've had a run-in with some big changes at Google AdSense and, of course, YouTube. So no matter what kind of traffic we're bringing in, and we have unbelievable traffic, and I want to thank you all for that. We have consistent 6,000 to 10,000 a day on The Truth Denied, and I want to thank you for that. And speaking of consistent traffic, listeners, and readers, I want to thank all of you who are out there in Radio Land for making Revolution Radio number 2 on the internet for talk show, number 2. This is absolutely amazing. I want to thank our beloved, and I do mean this with all my heart, owner and builder of this Revolution Radio site, Mr. We call him Nighthawk. His name is Mike Wrigley, and I never call him Mike. I always call him Hawk because the man works around the clock. So thank you for giving us this opportunity, those of us who are broadcasting on Revolution Radio. All of the hosts are volunteers, and of course the owner is a volunteer as well. It is absolutely phenomenal, and it was because of all of you. We collectively all work together to make this number 2. So thank you so much. Now, before I bring on my guests, I just want to give us some reminders. Market Oracle, UK, February 2013, said the central banks are finally in a crosshairs of focus for not producing a solution, more recently for worsening the problem. They have confused their function from providing liquidity in the belief that they are creating wealth. They have destroyed the system as costs rise relentlessly. Perversively, their efforts to dampen demand so as to reduce price inflation has added to the economic destruction. The outcome will be shocking in its power shift to the east, shocking in its evaporation of paper wealth, and shocking in the simplicity of the new financial structure that rises from the ashes based in barter and gold payments. However, the United States will be left behind due to its basic ownership of the global reserve currency being scrapped. The extreme corruption cannot be reformed. That's a very important line. The extreme corruption cannot be reformed. The U.S. financial system must be extinguished, and with it, extreme damage to the U.S. economy, which has been hopelessly dependent upon asset bubbles for 2 decades now. From the dollar collapse tabloid, they said the dominant explanation in the sound money community, at least, for the precious metals crash is sabotage. The metals exchanges were running out of physical product and faced imminent default, so the major governments, via their money center bank proxies, sold tens of billions of dollars of gold and silver futures contracts, forcing prices down and triggering stop-loss orders and margin calls that produce Monday's epic bloodbath. ABC reported on Monday that gold is at its lowest point since March of 2012. The biggest story on global financial markets is the collapse of gold and silver prices. Gold is down more than $90 an ounce since Friday, a fall about 7%. The price drop comes on top of last week's 4.7% tumble. Silver prices tumbled 8%, or $24 an ounce, Copper is also failing. Interesting. The reasons for the plunge are linked to the recent rise in the stock market, the slow, steady improvement of the U.S. economy, and the recent strength of the dollar. Keep in mind, this is ABC reporting. Crude oil futures have tumbled on global markets, down to less than $89 a barrel for West Trade crude, the lowest price since December of 2012. For years, gold bugs have predicted economic apocalypse with hyperinflation and a collapse of stock prices. That simply hasn't happened, and many investors have given up on gold, shifting funds out of precious metals. Last week, the infamous Goldman Sachs issued a report predicting gold prices would tumble. They must have a crystal ball. More volatility is expected in the days to come. Before its news, reported January 14th, 2013, we are living in the greatest debt bubble in the history of the world, and Wall Street has been transformed into a giant casino that is based on a massive web of debt, risk, and leverage. When that web breaks, we are going to see a stock market crash that is going to make 2008 look like a Sunday picnic. April 19, 2013, moneymarket.com reported a story entitled, "Could Gold and Silver Coins Become Legal Tender in Your State?" Well, guess what? Arizona voted yes. Confidence in the U.S. dollar is so low that 13 states are poised to recognize gold and silver coins as legal tender. Arizona is the latest state to make the move. Monday, the Republican-sponsored Arizona measure sailed through the House of Representatives 36-2. The bill moves on for another vote in the Senate, where it got its first nod February 28th in a 17-11 vote. Should it land on Governor Jan Brewer's desk, it's good as gold. Senator Chester Crandall of Arizona, the bill's sponsor, says the move is the logical thing for the state to do. Great. The bill doesn't mean residents will pay for groceries and utilities with coins. It's more of a backup plan that provides a lifeboat for Arizona so that we can construct Plan B when paper currency is no longer widely accepted. States considering similar bills include Colorado, Kansas, Idaho, Indiana, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Virginia. But why are we doing this? My guest tonight, again, is Mr. George McClure. We'll be speaking on these topics and more tonight, such as the collapse is well underway. How timely is this? Cyprus and what it means. SSRI's mass murder and poison prescription drugs. Walking zombies, what are they? Logical inconsistencies of the matrix and Western civilization. Who's really in charge? Understanding the pyramid. And, of course, music, historical antecedents of American music in the West and Southwest. I want to welcome to the show one of my favorite people, actually, George McClure. George, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for taking the time from your busy schedule to come and chat with us.
Thanks, Roxy. Pleasure to be here.
So, George, you are known as a writer, a showman, and a spiritualist. Can you just give us a little bit of background of why? And, you know, I just want to say, last time that you were on the show, one thing I do remember about you that is endearing to me is that you don't. It's endearing. You don't call yourself anything. You're just a person on the planet, and that's something that I find really special. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
That I'm just a guy on the planet?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's how I see myself. And every now and then people have told me through my life, and I've had two careers, I suppose, but one was very short-lived in retrospect, 8 years, and then well over 20 in music. And once or twice somebody has said to me, but don't you ever look back and say, what do you want to do when you were like a teenager or something, when you were 13, and think about where you are now? And I'm like, well, no, I don't ever do that. So maybe I just always look at things in a brand new way, in a brand new day. I'm not sure. There's a silver moon coming up tonight in Roxy. I remember last time we were on the radio, I was on with you, there was a big, fat, brownish, yellowish full moon coming up. And tonight there's a silvery moon, and it's a little earlier in the day. So, and I checked. I think it's going to be full in a few days. But on the Tzolk'in calendar, today's 10 Akbal, and that's Akbal is Akbahl, and that's night, Night, and house. This is it's a spiritual calendar, sort of the calendar that keeps me in tune and us in tune with the natural world. That's what it does. So today is 10 Akbal on that calendar, and it runs from 1 to 13, because the natural cycle of things, the Mayans, the great super mathematicians, the Mayans figured out that, realized and, quote, discovered that 13 is a fundamental multiple of the universe. And we run on it as well. So the Tzolk'in calendar runs on days number 1 through 13, and then they start again. So today is the 10th day of that cycle. And then there's another cycle that runs in unison with it that's 1 through 20. Anyway, I wrote out on an email, it said be discussing a little bit about music and topics a little known and widely captivating. So that's what I'm shooting for. I don't know why I don't typify myself or categorize myself. It's unpleasant to me, to get back to your question.
Correct. Yes, and that's I find it wonderful. Actually, you just sort of you just are, and I love that you explained about. Well, it's like here in the West, it's like the first question when you're introduced to somebody who is a stranger. Generally, the first question is, "What do you do?" And basically pointing at a career of sorts, etc. And we define ourselves by our careers. And that's one thing that I like about you, is that you live outside of the box. And you are not defined by simple terms such as some of the great terms that you have been defined as by others who write about you. For instance, a writer, a musician, a spiritualist, etc. But whenever I talk to you, I realize that you are just you are all things.
Thank you. Yeah, I defy definition, but I don't go to dentists anymore. I told a friend of mine yesterday or the day before, I no longer can just put up with the unmitigated, unbelievable hypocrisy and lack of knowledge, and they're in there poisoning everybody with fluoride. That wash that they spray in your mouth when they work in your mouth, and she reaches in and goes, that spray is 200 times the fluoride level of drinking water. So they're literally killing your teeth when they spray that stuff in, to rinse your mouth. They say, rinse, please. And then, and if you swallow, they always tell you don't swallow it. Well, that's why, because it can kill you, but they want it on your teeth. And
isn't that interesting that they're putting something in your mouth, and your gums and your tongue and everything in your mouth is absorbing it, whether you swallow it or not. So it's getting into your bloodstream. And yet they tell you to, as if spitting it out is going to be helpful.
Right. It's like taking a shower in it. But I was, the last time I went to a dentist, they were all very interested in me because I guess I don't know, but they were all very interested in me because they knew I was in music of something. But the one girl came over and was puttering around and taking care of, and she said, well, what do you do? And as you already picked up on, I'm not going to answer that question, right? And I said, well, I get up, and this is what I told her. I get up, and I see I look around, and I say, well, where do I want to go today? And I decided I wanted to come up. I forget her name. Maybe it's Gloria. I decided I wanted to come up and make a few new friends and talk to Gloria. So I drove up this way, and I came in and sat down, and here I am. And that's sort of my answer. I expanded on that, so it was long. I was giving a real answer. This is what I do.
Right.
And it at first, she just had a completely lost expression on her face, and then it seemed to click somehow. But I sort of want to answer certain questions, but I did want to discuss just for a minute. I wanted to mention, by the way, hello to our new listeners, because I know I've gotten emails and so on. We have a lot of new people listening tonight, and I'm glad for that. But I do want to talk, if I can, take 5 minutes or maybe 8 or 10 minutes on music, just a little bit, so I can say, well, I addressed music.
Oh,
would that be
absolutely. Okay? The floor is yours, George.
Okay. Well, in the around Nashville, and it's around Nashville, anytime the musicians, the session players, the professionals, the session musicians, they hear a 2/4 beat in a sort of a traditional type piece, they go, oh, polka. And I'm like, I'm really getting tired of this. And I thought, well, I'll just give my explanation here on air in depth, and maybe they'll hear it and, we'll be done with it. It's only polka if it comes from like Alberta and Manitoba and North and South Dakota and Wisconsin, Minnesota. That area was settled by, and this is a little bit about the historical antecedents of music in North America, but that area was settled by the North Central Europeans, the Norwegian and the Swedish, who brought the accordion with them, and they brought the true polka with them. So if people are from up north these days, from that part of the country, Canada and U.S., then probably a 2/4 beat traditional piece is a polka or polka derivative. The other place true polka came in was from Central Europeans, the Anglos coming from Germany and Czech Republic, what's now Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, Central Europe. They settled in Pennsylvania and also in Texas. Huge complement of German people in Texas. German is still spoken as a native language there in places, New Braunfels and other areas. And so in Texas and in Pennsylvania, you may hear a 2/4 beat traditional piece of music, and it may be polka derivative. However, when you get over into the part of the country where my origins are, in the other four corners, Chihuahua, Sonora, New Mexico, and Arizona, that area of the Chihuahuan Desert and Sonoran Desert area regions, the 2/4 beat with an accordion in it absolutely is not polka. It comes from conjunto. That comes from Spain and Portugal. The Spaniards brought with them on those little tiny sailing galleon ships, those little tiny sailing ships, believe it or not, they had horses and livestock in the holds, and they also had full-sized gold-gilded harps, incredibly heavy, huge things, and they brought them over in those little ships. And those harps, those gold-plated heavy harps found their way up into central Mexico, and as the Spaniards gradually lost their control over the years, some of those harps found their way into the hands of the native people. And that's why when you listen to Los Lobos, their recording of La Bamba, you hear a harp. Because in the traditional mariachi music, which is traced back to a tiny town way deep in Central America.
I'm sorry, George. We've got callers that are coming through on the air, so I think the callers are moving around and stuff. Callers,
let me shorten it a little bit.
Callers, if you're on hold right now, which you are, I see a couple of you. Can you please mute your mics, please? Thank you. Go ahead, George.
Okay. Well, I needed a break anyway, so to break it up. So the mariachi has a harp in it traditionally, and then the other sort of Hispanic or Spanish types of music in that region, in the Southwest region, would be mariachi, would be norteño and ranchera or ranchero. Sometimes I call it corridos. It's sort of a country music. And conjunto usually has an accordion in it. And then there's another class of Spanish songs, and James S. Griffith is one of the fabulous experts on this kind of music, the spiritual, the saint music. It's sort of like Southern gospel, except throughout that region, every little town, or most of the little towns, have a patron saint. And a song is composed or sung about that patron saint. So each town, or most of the towns, will have their own spiritual song, and Jim Griffith collected a lot of it, wrote a book on it, has an album of them, and so on. And these are some of the influences in that area, 3 strong Spanish influences, Spanish music influences, and then there's the Apache chicken scratch bands, they're called, and there's Tono, Odom, or what used to be known as the Papago Indians or the Pima Indians. The Odom Indians is a dominant cultural force there. And then there are the Anglo, and of course further up in the state, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, Roxy, the Navajo and the Hopi, and also the Yaqui and the Seris Indians down in Sonora and Chihuahua. But the cultures I was acculturated with there were the Apache, the Papago or Odom, and the Spanish types of music, and then the Anglo types of music. The traditional forms are bluegrass is very popular, bluegrass music. The fiddle hoedown fiddle is the king of everything in the West. The fiddle and hoedown music is the king of the traditional forms of music. And then there's Texas swing is played as well, which is largely from a Bob Wills type influence. And those were the different. So in that area, you might be influenced food-wise, language-wise, and music. You may find that there are 5 dominant forces there, whereas if you go to New Orleans, you'll find 3. You find the French, the Acadian, Cajun, and French spoken, and the Black Carib, the African from the Caribbean, and then the Anglo. So I was acculturated in tremendously diverse and rich cultural heritage in those areas. And that is what I wanted to speak about, and I'm turning it back to you to see where we are.
Thank you. I mean, that makes sense as to who you are. We've got a couple of callers on the line. I generally don't bring callers on, but they're ringing off the hook here. So I'm going to take 623 if you're on the air. Welcome to the Truth Tonight Talk Radio show. And what's your name?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I certainly can.
Oh, okay, Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. Welcome to the show. Do you have a
question?
Hi,
Roxy. I do. I live in Phoenix as well, and I just found you 2 days ago. But I'm wondering about the microwave towers. Excuse me. I'm nervous.
That's okay. Don't be nervous. You're wondering about the microwave towers.
Yes,
Are
the
you
ones that are
talking about cell phone towers?
They look kind of like it. It's a little different. It's got, signs on there, hazardous, radioactive. It kind of seems more to me than what they're saying it is. And I've tried to invest.
Microwave?
Yes.
They're deadly. They're deadly. They'll cook you.
Yes, I know. That's what I'm worried about because it's right by my house. And
Well,
I see them working on it. I see them working on it every day, and it's really disturbing to me.
Well, when I lived in Texas...
So during the break, what I did for you, Catherine, is I don't know if you've gone this far, but I did have the producers going to put a link into the chat room if you want to chase it down. It's a full list of the 15 FCC-registered microwave towers in just an area of Litchfield Park, Arizona.
Okay.
It says all of the assigned frequencies, the grant dates for these, the Water Conservation District, its telephone number, email, fax numbers, and so forth. So any of you that are listening, if you're concerned with having microwave towers in your vicinities, this is just one huge list of contacts. And what I would suggest that you do is I would suggest you start contacting all of these numbers, either by email or make telephone calls, ask them what they're doing, tell them that you don't feel comfortable with this near you. A lot of them are wireless systems. They're all defined by what they are. And I would continue to do that. And if you could, in your area, if there's anybody interested in your area, get a lot of people to show them the proof that they really are in existence and that they are referring to them as microwave towers. And that's what I suggest.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to tell you, I called around the senators of Arizona about the chemtrails, and I got nowhere with them. So when I call these numbers, will I get anywhere? Or
that's up to you because, it's very difficult to penetrate the system. I call it the system.
I know. Yeah,
and I'm sure that George has his own thoughts about it as well. But one thing that does matter is that to not feel, and this is for anybody, to not feel powerless when something is going on. And you can educate. See, Catherine, you can educate those around you. Give them all of this information that's listed in here to show them that you're not crazy.
Right. I've tried, and I'm losing friends and family, but I'm going to keep going.
But here's the proof. And that link that I just gave you, that link is proof right there of the registrations, the grant monies, the numbers, who's in charge, down to the email addresses, telephone numbers, you name it. So this gives you all the information. Even the call sign numbers are on them. So you can even go to the one that's nearest you and get that call sign number and actually reference it in your email.
Okay. I can do that.
I just was going to make a very quick anecdotal reference in Texas where everybody, it's sort of a ranch community and ranch style background. People won't live near high power towers and microwave. They can't sell houses there. They go dirt cheap, and because everybody's a rancher and everybody knows that those towers create birth defects in the cattle and it makes other cows infertile. So I mean, if it were me, I'd try to get away from there as quickly as possible. And I know that's not always easy for people, but I think it's probably a pretty significant health risk.
That's a good suggestion as well, George. And the other thing is that you can look these maps up. So in the case that any of you out there do want to relocate, take a look at the microwave maps as far as towers in any area that you're planning on moving, and hopefully you can move away from one of these. But in the meantime, educate the people around you that they do exist in your neighborhoods.
Don't be moving next to any. Don't move next to any fertilizer plants either.
Okay, who is that area code 214 talking now?
No,
okay, we've got two people on the line. Hold on. Yeah. Catherine, we're going to have to let you go. We did give you the information, and thank you for listening. Thanks for calling in the show. We really do appreciate it. And now, area code Thanks. 214 area code. Go ahead. If you have a question for the guest, go ahead. What's your name?
No, that's David down in Dallas.
Hi, David.
You guys
Dallas.
Y'all remember that, George Bush, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, George Bush Sr., everybody's showing up in Dallas tomorrow.
Oh,
what's he doing
yeah.
in Dallas tomorrow?
Yeah, they're all showing up over here for the George Bush Library. But what I was going to say is, you don't want to move by any fertilizer plants. We need to start learning from our mistakes. That's what you do when you have a job. So they don't need to be putting any fertilizer plants next to where people's houses are. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, they'll do it if they can get away with it. Yeah, those power lines you gotta be at least 1,000 feet. That's where you do that. Right.
500 feet, 1,000 feet.
Good point. Good point. A fifth of a mile. Yes, sir.
Did you have a question for George?
No, I was just going to say, the Cherokee language probably makes up 25% of the English language. All the words that I'm speaking now, probably 25% of them are Cherokee. You had the old Queen's English from way back when, but then you go into, American English. American English, almost 25% of the words are Native American. You got all these cities and like Oklahoma, all these different words and cities and states all over the United States that are, Native American words. But, I wanted to bring that up. I'd still like to know where the word cool came from.
Cool, is it COOL?
Yeah, I think the Cherokees made that word up. Cool, man.
They probably did. Yeah.
They're very cool. David, thanks so much for your call. We really appreciate it.
Put me on mute. I'll listen for a minute or two.
All right, go ahead. So, George, in light of this, as you can see, people right off the bat are calling in just concerned with just about everything under the sun, including the sun. But back to what we initially wanted to get into, which is, financial collapse, global collapse. And I know that you had some interest in what happened in Cyprus. Can you give us a nutshell of why you were interested in what is going on in the country of Cyprus right now?
Yeah, sure. I follow, not to the extent I did in 08, 09, and 10. I investigated 40, 60 hours a week I was spending on financials and global, and I don't anymore, but I still keep apprised of the major shifts. And something like Cyprus, when you're looking at in Greece last year with the rioting going on and the so-called austerity, it can be portentous. It can be the beginning of the house of cards following. So I think we all sentient sort of people who like financial stuff kind of watch these things as they come up. So that's why I did. And I think everybody kind of knows now. It's a little bit old news. So thumbnail is great. The people were robbed of their savings or the money they were holding in banks. And it's still, the latest report I saw a week or two ago is that the over $100,000, just like in the United States, is uninsured by the Eurozone. And over $100,000 was going to be pilfered deeply, maybe up to 40% or more of all the money's gone, just stolen. And under $100,000, I saw the last was a 1 or 1.4% was going to be stolen from everybody. And I just think the summary point, and probably everybody sort of has figured this out by now, is that this is what they're going to do everywhere. As the banks collapse, the banks run the governments collapse, the banks fund the governments, they lend the money to the governments, and they tell the governments to take the money from the people. That's exactly what happened. So it was a test run to see how the people of Cyprus would react and what they put up with. This is going to happen everywhere. It was a test run, just like What was in Boston last week was a test run. It's exactly what these things are. And I'd like to talk about Boston a little bit. Let's look at the big picture of what was going, what the ramifications are. I noticed, now I don't listen to very much mainstream at all, just sometimes when I'm driving I put on a talk radio show, and during the 5-minute, hourly, and half-hour breaks, it's mainstream news that's pumped in, and it's really even more fascist than what you see on NBC or something, Fox News. It's even more government hype. And I noticed that a few days ago they were saying, people in Boston are scared. So they're telling you that you're scared. They're telling the people that you're scared. Well, no, they're not. They may be scared right where that thing blew up, and I don't want to minimize the horror and the tragedy of what happened, because that is it's horrific what did happen, and certainly it would upset us tremendously in our midst if something like that happens. But I'm saying telling the people in Boston and Massachusetts that they're scared is nonsense. It's a lie. They want you to feel scared. They want you to think that everybody's scared, and it's untrue. They also said they were telling people in Boston to stay in their houses. This is the first step of a lockdown. It always is. They want people to stay in their houses and be afraid to go out. Then they're under control. And all this was a test case, as horrible as it was, as horrific as it was. All it was a test case of locking down America, city by city. And we're going to see nothing but an escalation of these terroristic events that are intended to scare people and lead to a lockdown where people are told to stay inside and don't come out. And then I'd like to just mention that Katrina was the horrible test case of maybe our lifetimes, and I was aware of this as Katrina unfolded. The minute they announced that Bush flew off to the underground safety zone in Colorado for a 2-week, quote, vacation, the minute they announced that, I knew that this was a test case for destroying America. And if you just look at what happened in Katrina, the people were let go. They flew out, the mayor of New Orleans flew out the wealthiest big-name people immediately on helicopters, and then he evacuated too, and they left everybody else behind. And it was a horrible situation of humanity left just on their own to die. And that's what they're going to do all over in America. That's what they're going to do in Europe. And Cyprus is what they're going to do if we let them. And that kind of news can be really, really seriously disheartening if you think about it and you see the big picture and you understand what's going on, and that these things are really test cases for the subjugation of humanity. It can be extremely unsettling and upsetting. So what I do is I look at the Tzolk'in calendar, and I'm reverting more and more lately. I'm not even listening to anything on the internet now. I mean, it's just like I've noticed, and I wanted to ask you, Roxy, and ask our listeners, have people been noticing that people everywhere are just like going bonkers? They're just going nuts. They're getting crazy and just doing really crazy things. Am I picking up on that correctly, that people are really zinging out lately?
Well, I can say this. I don't know that everyone's doing that, but I can tell you what I can tell you what I see on social media, mainly Facebook, and groups and things that I've had for quite some time. I rarely want to participate because I'm seeing no one in the middle anymore. No one. Everyone seems to be completely off balance. And so when you start to have these conversations on the posts one person's pulling you one way to the complete extreme, and it becomes very chaotic. And then if you try to say something got down the middle, or something like, balance the conversation, I know personally myself, I've been completely attacked and just get out of the way. You can't see, wake up, and we report on this. We investigate all this stuff, we're you know what I mean? So it's off. And so with that, I will agree that people seem to be tenuous and off balance in general.
Right. That's what I was getting at. Off balance, confused, and anxiety ridden, in the sense of ready to strike out, and a little bit crazy, just a little bit out there. And that's what I've been seeing as well. Although, so I'm really glad to, you're in touch with it a lot more than I am. And lately, just in the last week, I've noticed all this seems to be kind of this crazy, out of balance, off balance behavior is just getting out of control everywhere. And I've just turned more and more of it off. This is just what I've been doing. I've turned more and more of it off, and I'm focusing on the plants, on the trees, on the animals, and watching the moon come up, and just shutting everything off. And I'm reminded again, earlier today, I was remembered Ian Lungold and how often he's passed, how often he said over and over again, he said, it's going to get really chaotic and really crazy, and you've got to have your foundation, you've got to have a spiritual or some kind of roots put down. And I think this is the time. I was thinking today, we're here now. This is the time that all of us in the know, we've been preparing for. The time is here now that we've been preparing for 5 years or 10 years or 50 years or 3 years or however long we've been awake and knowing something, the real horrors come. I think it's here now. And I think there's a real fundamental shift going on, and the people with all this craziness and jumping to extremes and everything are exemplifying that the human race and the planet and maybe our world and our universe is really realigning right now. The shift is well underway. The shift is going on. And everybody that's clinging to the old way or the other way, the power structure, they're having a hard time. And maybe everybody's waking up. Maybe everybody's waking up at the same time now, so it's especially chaotic that I see that going on. And I'm just reverting more and more. I'm watching the trees. I'm watching the plants. All my new garlic that I put in a week and a half ago, they're 8 inches today. That's what I'm looking at. The apple and pear blossoms and, what kind of crop. That's what I'm looking at.
Well, and I can appreciate I can appreciate that as well. It keeps you focused on something that's more positive as well than the negative, because to watch your garlic grow is a very cool thing. And wouldn't you say, George, that as a whole, humanity, that we are very vulnerable right now, and when we're off balance and vulnerable all in one fell swoop, that's a real concerning place for us to be. Right. Yeah, which is, I think just naturally and intuitively I go to my safety zone, and it may be that it's all of our safety zones, and to be in touch with the natural world. And our grandfather, I call him my grandfather, Floyd Red Crow, said this, and it's on my website, go to georgemcclure.net, and it's there, or you can go on YouTube. And he said, you must learn to grow something. You must be in touch with the natural world. If you're not,
the times are going to be very, very chaotic. He said this 10 years ago, or more and more. He said things will be very chaotic, and it's likely you won't make it. Well, we may be there right now. It's looking to me like all this stuff is just heightening and accelerating in the people's behavior and everything. So I want to remember from whence I came. I want to remember who I am and where I am and where my soul is. And I remember a girl saying to me, but I can't grow anything. I live in an apartment in Montreal, and I'm on the 3rd floor. Well, you can. And I want to take a minute because this is so important to know and learn how to grow things. And by the way, half of our population is very, very lucky that they can grow something and participate in that regeneration of life thing. And then that we all need to revisit our roots of learning how to grow something. And you can grow it if you're on the 3rd floor of a Montreal apartment. What you do is you get one of your mixing bowls, a plastic mixing bowl, a big one, or if you can afford to go to a store and buy a pot, to grow a plant in. Get that mixing bowl and get some potting soil and put it in there, and go outside your apartment building and scrape up some dust and some dirt, or if there isn't any, get some of the cobbled rock at the edge of the street where the blacktop is breaking apart, and mix that in. Mix it in. A broken concrete would be a little better. You don't want too much tar in there. But you mix that in a little bit with the potted soil and get it wet, and then you can go to the grocery store and buy a couple potatoes and chunk them up and put them 2 inches underneath the surface of the soil, the potting soil. Put them the cut face down and the skin side up. Chunk them up into chunks. And just keep the soil moist, and the potatoes will grow. Potatoes are extremely robust plants, and they're going to grow. Put them over by the window. And then another thing you can do when you build up your courage for it, get some tomato seedlings. You can go to a farm. What do you call those stores? I don't know where you get them. At any little grocery store, they'll sell tomato seedlings, little sets, or onion sets, and you can put them in. Or another thing that's extremely robust are sunflower. Sunflower seeds, if you buy them in a store, they won't grow like a potato will. But you can an onion will. If you go to a store and buy a garlic bulb and split it apart into the cloves, you can plant the cloves and they'll grow. So it's non-genetically modified stuff. It's natural. And you can get natural sunflower seeds online. You can just Google that, non-hybrid sunflower seeds, and get some of those, and you can plant them. They're extremely robust plants. They're like weeds, and you can eat them. They're really, really good for you. So I just wanted to point that out. We all must be in touch. Get a kitten and let it have babies, things like that. They remind us of who we are and where we get our food and how to do things. And more than any other time, we need that now.
Certainly. And that helps, don't you think? By the way, George, you're right in step with most all of my guests. My guests all are talking about the same thing that you're talking about as far as the heightened everything, the speeding up of time even, and events, and then people being sort of in this chaotic imbalance state. Do you think that sometimes it can be an actual distraction to people to be going down rabbit holes all over the place trying to find out what chemtrails are and what this is and what that is and what they've done to their food and the fluoride in the water and the this and the that and the toothpaste and blah? Do you think that in itself, it can be throwing people off because they're looking at all this, trying to find all this evidence to sack up for what, as the caller had said? And speaking of callers, we have another caller on hold. So caller, just hold on there. The 707 call. Just go ahead and hold on for a second. But is it possible that the focus really should be on the in order to bring ourselves into balance, as what you were talking about, the music, the gifts of life, to actually pay attention to life, to live here on this planet while we're here, and not get so distracted by mountains of evidence that we have to persecute or prosecute who? As the woman who said, Catherine, who called, she's gone to her senator, she's gone to her congressman. They're ignoring her.
Right. Now she's done what a diligent citizen and a responsible human being is duty bound and should do. And she did the exact same thing I did as I saw the horrific crimes that Bush and Cheney were committing in 2003 and so on. I wrote articles to everybody, the Washington Post, to Chris Matthews. He actually read one of my emails on the air. You know, I was driven to do what this lady did, the caller did, and we all want to do that as responsible people. And then after a long time, it took a long time with me, I'm a slow learner, I realized I'm not getting anywhere. And absolutely, I think we can be absolutely overwhelmed with it. And it could be this rash of this explosion of people just jumping and snapping and going to extremes, or people that are beginning to really wake up, and they're kind of like you said, they're just overwhelmed with the number of rabbit holes to investigate and who's the culprit. So maybe after we take this call, we can address who the culprit is and take a bigger view picture. The big view picture is very, very important to understanding these things. Maybe we can discuss a few of those things.
I think the big picture is very important. I think that you're absolutely right. And caller, we're going to be going to a break here in about 30 seconds, but go ahead and come on the line, 707. Welcome to the show. What's your name?
Hey, this is Emily. How are you, dear?
Emily, great. Thank you so much for calling. You're wonderful, wonderful researcher. George, meet Emily. She's a fabulous researcher. She's also been on the show before. Emily, what's the nature of your call?
Well, it's a seeking of balance. You know, we have several points of view to look at. One is our inner self and the harmony that we can keep ourselves going. And another one is to look at those around us.
You who are just joining us at the top of the hour, our guest is George McClure. His website is georgemcclure.net. It's also hooked up at thetruththenight.com on the front page. And I love what is on the front of George McClure's website. It says, content dedicated to the human race, la gente, and to the fish, the sea, and the stars, a todo el mundo. Just absolutely fabulous. And, of course, we've got our caller still on the line, Miss Emily Craig. So, Emily, you were just about to introduce us to the idea of what your perception of balance is.
Balance. Okay, we have ourselves to keep going, and we have to go inward to be aware of ourselves enough to nurture ourselves first. And then there are those around us that we care about in relationship. And our skills generally are devoted to helping people around us in some way or other. In my case, I'm a researcher, a geek, and I do basic research. And it's people like you and Al Weber and a few others who take what I do and make it make sense to people, because I'm not that extroverted and I'm not that articulate. And then we have the times to attend to. And the times we are in are clearly cosmic. They are clearly out of our control. And I know I went through the same thing that you're talking about. And in 2003, I showed up at the Pentagon with a letter for the generals why they shouldn't go to war against Iraq. You know, we all have stepped forward and put our foot in it or mouth in it, and been basically beaten back because nobody pays any attention. The bureaucracies and the hierarchies operate from compartmentalization and secrecy and classified information and need to know, And so they don't share information with each other. And that's the cosmic situation we're in. So it's a balancing act, that's all. And we have to attend to all three of those aspects constantly, like a trinity, going back and forth between, I got to take care of myself, got to take care of my kids, pay attention, and we'll make it. We'll make it that way. That's all.
That's a wonderful thought. Emily, thanks so much for calling. And George, what do you think about what Emily just said?
Total. Yeah, she's totally there. I mean, I'm in total agreement. And my understanding, what I have is, as I said last time on the show, Roxy, congruent. I think we're in congruency there, but I really can't add anything to it. I think she hit the nail on the head.
Well, great. All right, you guys have a nice rest of the evening, and I'll listen on.
Oh, thank you so much, Emily. You have a great evening, too.
You're welcome.
Thank you for calling. So, with that in mind, we come back to this place of balance, and balance is sounding more and more as though it is the perfect place to be, actually, would be in a place of balance, because that is a place of strength and empowerment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I recently wrote a letter. I don't know if we'll have time to get to it, but, I came across this thing, Roxy, and I emailed it out to my 2012 list, and that I think my primary source on it was a George Noory coast-to-coast program. About an hour in, he interviewed a guest for about an hour or maybe an hour and an hour of phone calls. And this guy is really, really well informed, basic scientific approach to things. And he was researching chemtrail residue, the aluminum specifically in chemtrails falling in Norway. And it's just amazing what he found to me. And I don't know how widespread this information is, but maybe I can just read the summary of it real fast, and you can tell me, well, maybe everybody already knows about it. But cows in Norway, this is all the way over in Norway, ingest a kilogram of aluminum in under a year, in less than a year. This is doctor and lab tested. And the aluminum is coming from the chemtrails. So the cows are ingesting 2.2 pounds in less than a year, eating it on the grass and breathing it. Oxygen levels on Earth were 40% previously, and now are 20%. We need to look a little deeper at that statistic. It's correct. But on Earth, through the millennia, through the eras, the oxygen content has increased and decreased. So that in and of itself, I don't personally, I say, well, I'm not worried about aluminum's causing that. Third point, aluminum spray makes trees and plants brittle and highly combustible. This is well documented, especially in the Northwest United States and western coast of Canada. Next point, aluminum spray sucks the moisture out of the air, drying out the ground and creating droughts, which is essentially what happened here over large parts of the United States last year. This for the early part of the warm season, which is normally very wet, and then they dump the rain in the end of July and in August, which is normally our dry period. Next point, aluminum spray raises the temperature, again creates droughts. And now into some of the more frightening things, 100 million acres of boreal forest burned in Siberia last year. Mm-hmm. And this is because the aluminum makes the leaves brittle and dry, and it's also an accelerant. The aluminum, as you'll recall from your high school chemistry class, some metals are explosive. They're so combustible, and aluminum makes the tree branches extremely combustible. And then finally, forest fires in America are accelerating at a huge rate. And you can Google something like forest fires increase, and you can see the percentage increases. And aluminum in chem spray is causing skyrocketing Alzheimer's and dementia in young and old alike. Now, this is a supposition, and this is a conclusion. And if you took that to a medical doctor or to Harvard, who is funded by Rockefeller, you'll find that it's completely rejected outright. And they're going to say, you don't have any proof of that. And this gets back to something that I said last time I was on your show. I don't need the same standard of proof that these crazy people do. They require the bulletproof, as you said, I think the bulletproof criminal law beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't need that. I just need a preponderance of the evidence, and I know I need it. All I need is a common sense preponderance of the evidence. And something horrifying happened to me. This was a couple months ago. They did unbelievably heavy chem spraying over Nashville. It was worse than I've ever seen. In Roxy, I drove out, my normal route and walked out my normal walk, and I literally could not see a quarter of a mile. And I've never seen this ever in Nashville. And that was chem spray. It was spray from I recognize it, I know it, I watched it come in for a whole day, and by the second day, it lasted 3 days. And I'm going to tell you, I started to be unable to string thoughts together correctly. And it was not a symptom of something else that I'm familiar with, a fatigue or hypoglycemia or something like. It was not that. It was a different. It happened in a different way. You know how probably when we all get very, very tired, it's hard to keep all your thoughts strung together. And it was sort of like that, except it was in a particular way. I just wouldn't be able to complete the steps, maybe 6 steps through a thought process to make a cup of coffee or something, and I'd only get to 2, and then it was just gone. It wasn't that I forgot what I was doing. It wasn't a short-term memory loss. It was that my thought process was completely broken. And that happened at exactly the same time. The chem spray was so heavy I couldn't see more than a quarter of a mile or a fifth of a mile, which is beyond. I mean, at that point, they're literally just turning everybody into zombies, literally.
Is that what you refer to as the walking zombies?
Well,
or is there more to it?
Well, it's well known that aluminum causes Alzheimer's and dementia. It's well known and well documented that the Alzheimer's and dementia is, you used to get it when you were 60, and then you got it when you're 50, and then you got it when you're 40. Now people when they're 30, they're getting it. In late 20s, they're getting it. So something is radically, dramatically changing, and it corresponds with the influx of chem spraying of aluminum. And so it's all well documented. All you have to do is realize that it's coming from the sky now. And so I think that, there was some piece on mainstream media, when was it, January or half a year ago, about some figure came out and mentioned something, used the phrase walking zombies, and everybody's like, well, what are the walking zombies? Maybe this is what they're talking about. Maybe this is what they're alluding to. They're literally turning everybody into walking zombies, because that's what aluminum does, and that's what it's doing. And at the same time, it's burning off our boreal forests, which can have a radical and dramatic effect on the amount of oxygen in our atmosphere, and they can literally kill the planet. That's what's going on now. Is the scope of this chem spraying is such that they're literally going to kill all life on the planet if we don't stop. That's literally.
I think that's always been a concern, you know what I mean? But it seems that at this point, there are so many, and we don't have to go into this, there are just so many angles now, you know what I mean, with the GMO foods, with the toxic soils, that we're not being able to get our nutrition that we need from, even organic foods. The best of the best foods even are lacking in major nutrients. Most people don't even know about it. Then, of course, we are, the USA, of course, is the fat food nation, and of course, everywhere we go, meaning all over the world, other countries, we like to see a McDonald's and a Burger King there. So we're involving the entire world in this fat food nation of poison food. And the list goes on. And then we've got the water source and the air source beyond, quote unquote, the smog of the 80s when I was in LA. That was a real big one. And they restored the air there. We have another call, and we also have a question. We'll get to the question, who flies these metals? I imagine the person that's asking this in the chat room is asking who's it in the planes that are putting this stuff into the air.
Right. Well, and I haven't investigated that in depth, but what I have seen about it, when I've Googled it and read articles, what I have come across is that it's largely military, and a lot of the planes, there are people you can Google it on the internet who are real experts in all types of military and civilian aircraft pilots and former pilots and so on, that are experts, and they know how to identify the craft, and they've written reports. So you could just Google that and look it up. But most of what I've read indicates that it's military.
Okay. And the caller at 740 area code, welcome to the Truth Denied Talk Radio show. And what's your name?
My name is Tom. Roxy, and I've been listening to you and George for the last hour. Could you elaborate more on where this is all coming from? The chemtrails and stuff like that, the aluminum that's going down in that. Could you elaborate more, you and George, on that? Who's doing this?
Well, as George had just mentioned.
Yeah, you go. I was just going to say, you go right ahead, Bill Gates and all that, and then I'll follow up later.
Well, as what George had just said, caller, it's pointing at the military, and a couple of things that you might want to read if you're new to this, or new to the subject matter of chemtrails. What you might want to do is look at a document. This is the one that stunned me back in the day when I was doing research in the very beginning. And it's Owning the Weather by 2025, a military application. You might want to take a look at that. And if you don't know where to find it, we have it on our website on thetruthDenied.com. Just go to on the front page, look at documents, and we have all of those documents listed. The more pertinent ones are listed, so you don't have to filter through tons of them. I think we have about 6 documents there. You might want to go ahead and take a look at that, and then at the same time look at a UN session that happened in the 70s called Agenda 21, and look at what the world leaders were talking about in Agenda 21 conference in the UN. Both of these kind of match up. Both of them talk about weather modification and weather, basically owning the weather, basically controlling the weather, and the reasons why they would want to do such things. On the one hand, for war tactics, the military application is obvious. It was so they could drought a country, they could cause a hurricane or a giant tornado or a tsunami, playing with the weather. And no one would know, and it's in the document. It's in the military document. No one would know, meaning the country, that they were controlling the weather, moving the weather around, no one would know that it was an act of war. Because you wouldn't think it was the weather.
And now the target, instead of being one particular country, the target is all of us. It's the whole planet. They're just doing it to all of us.
Well, and I'm talking about applications, and of course weather modification is also linked to controlling. You control the weather, you control agriculture. And look at what we're having with Monsanto and GMO seeds, etc.
Right.
We are already controlling the weather. Now we control the food chain. We control agriculture. Hence, the aluminum-resistant GMO seeds and the drought-tolerant genetically modified seeds and genetically engineered plants. So you see that there's quite a large picture. And caller, I hope that we answered your question.
Yes, ma'am, you did. Okay, I'll let you carry on, and thank you very much.
And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much. We enjoy all of our listeners. So, George, you want to add to that?
Yeah, moving on. I mean, I think I don't have that much to add to it, but who's doing this? Who's really in charge? Understanding the pyramid. Let's look at that for a minute. Who owns the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve Bank, the central bank of course, we all know of United States, that controls the United States and gave, what is it, up to $17 trillion now on the bailout to bailing out the European banks and the European Central Bank and their favorite corporations and so on, and stealing all the money from the people. Of course, where that money came from was they crashed the stock market down 35% and stole all that money from everybody's mutual funds and retirement. And that's where that money came from. And then they transferred it to the central banks in Europe and so on, and the governments. But who owns the Federal Reserve? And my references for this are Eustace Mullins and Bob Chapman, the former late great, unfortunately, Robert Chapman. Now, Bob is the one who told me that, well, it's common knowledge that J.P. Morgan, now J.P. Morgan Chase, is Rockefeller's bank. It's always been the Rockefeller's bank. David Rockefeller owns J.P. Morgan Chase. J.P. Morgan Chase owns the controlling share in the New York Fed, the New York Federal Reserve Bank, which means David Rockefeller owns it. If it's a controlling share, that's who owns it. And the New York Fed owns the controlling share in the Federal Reserve Bank. This means that David Rockefeller owns the Federal Reserve, and he's Bernanke's boss, then, if you want to look at it that way. Now, who owns the cancer industry? David Rockefeller's great-grandfather sold cancer tonic from the back of a wagon. This is the guy who figured out if I sell a tonic, a false cure, to a disease that nobody has, or better yet, a disease that we create in them, I can make a fortune, and I can keep on making a fortune. That's David Rockefeller's great-grandfather. And they founded the cancer industry more than anyone, and including the allopathic medical industry. According to Eustace Mullins, David Rockefeller owns every major pharmaceutical company on the planet. And I have no reason to doubt the veracity of his information. You can Google him and read him, or you can also go to YouTube and watch him. He's quite an entertaining speaker, extremely knowledgeable, one of the foremost world's experts in the financial history of Western civilization. He researched back 2,000 years. And David Rockefeller owns ExxonMobil. David Rockefeller owns Con Ed, Consolidated Edison, which Con Ed is nothing less than the energy infrastructure of the entire northeastern North American continent, everything from TVA up past Montreal over through Chicago. Everything is Con Ed. So he owns the substations, the the electricity transferring and generation and everything else. David Rockefeller owns ConAgra, Consolidated Agra. ConAgra, one of the largest food production companies on the planet. He owns the third largest food processing company. David Rockefeller owns the fifth largest genetic engineering company on the planet, going hand in hand with food production and food processing. And he owns Soros. Soros is his financial operative at the street level. It's George Soros who went in and funded the opposition groups to break up the Tea Party. And who are those other people, Roxy? They wear a white mask when they're on YouTube and they... Anonymous. Soros is the guy who hit the street level and funded the opposition that destroyed those groups. And the Occupy movement, the Occupy and the Tea Party movement. So that's just David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller is I didn't put this in my notes, but this is really, really important, founding member of he actually is the foundational chair of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's the guy. So CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, you can Google that and read about it.
Who is Rockefeller beholden to?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Who is Rockefeller beholden to?
Yeah, and thanks again for that. By the way, I wanted to point out that Bill Gates spends millions, hundreds of millions on funding chemspraying, and you can hear him talk about that proudly. Depopulation, big on his, and Oprah is in on it. I know we're going to get attacked again, Roxy. I got unbelievably attacked last time, the day after I was on your show, and I expect nothing but the same again. And when you hit the real truth, it really threatens a lot of people, and they tend to retaliate like what they are. It's the immature, the unfully fledged, fully grown sort of humans that they apparently are. But I don't know a lot about that, but I have been told by good sources who have a great deal of knowledge in spiritual areas, in particular arenas, that it's the Pope and the Catholic Church, the Roman Church, the ancient Roman Church has been in charge forever.
The Vatican.
Yes. They have the largest, most extensive library and collection of information on the planet, far surpassing.
Well, from what I'm seeing in the last few years, I think that they're losing interest in the world on a number of levels, and they're losing investors. So that's a more positive thing as we go through this change. And also, George, we do have a caller. His name is Steve Travesty. He's also a host. Welcome to the show, Steve, and thanks for joining us.
Howdy, Roxy. Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good.
It's great. Do you have a question?
Yeah. I've been hearing about all this stuff. We spent a lot of time in the truth movement, getting down to the bottom of it, like who's at what, where's the money going, what's actually happening, et cetera, et cetera. So much of this information is almost recapped for me with the level of research I've done. My question, what I want to bring to the table is that we know so much. It would seem really hard that you can't formulate a quote-unquote takedown strategy. So I was hoping to maybe tap that vein of conversation. Pure example would be, say chemtrails, right? Well, these planes obviously have to fly to and from places, meaning, if you track them long enough, you'll figure out what airfield they're at, especially if you can follow the money and who owns what airfields. Second, okay, they're using things like barium, strontium, aluminum. Who's giving them the barium, strontium, aluminum? Can you do something about them? You know, you start pinching at their resources, making them less capable of doing what they can do.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is attacking them, or not really attacking them, but responding to them in kind. And I take a different point of view, that they're not really spiritually fully grown up people. And I've got so many friends all over the world, New Zealand and everywhere, and they go, well, they're just not grown up. They haven't, they're sort of stuck in their adolescence or their childhood in different ways, developmentally. And so I don't look at fighting them in their playing field like that. I get where you're coming from, and we need warriors like you. We need warriors because it gets things done and it gets people aware of issues and said, I'm just not one of them. I'm more on a spiritual.
If they're acting like children effectively, then we come in and we act like adults. We come in and we say, listen,
right,
you have not shown the maturity, the responsibility, and the capability of playing with your toys and playing nice with others.
Exactly.
We're taking them away, and we're going to administer the appropriate punishment for your behavior.
Well, yeah, I don't believe in punishment, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you totally. Yeah, I mean, I don't punish people. It's up to people to be to be autonomous and self-directing, and to be self-cognizant and aware. I may help somebody, I may not help somebody, I may cast someone adrift. But I hear where you're coming from. I'm not saying if somebody goes out and kills somebody that, we don't do something to them. I'm not saying that at all. But I agree.
A perfect example, I think, of what you're saying, Steve, is the oil industry. The oil industry is so huge, and there have been so many over the last 3 decades trying to change that, trying to change the addiction that we have to oil, if you will. But when companies are so big, or corporations, I should say, or perhaps like the military, who is in bed with the corporations, who are in bed with the government, to find all of this compartmentalized. Where are they getting the aluminum? Where are they getting this? Where are they getting that? Where do they make it? Where do they cook it up? Where are they get, the whole thing. It sounds like the war on drugs to me. It's so compartmentalized that I think we could literally spend a lifetime trying to track it all down and still really get nowhere.
Right. So I just
nowhere because we're not doing anything with the information.
I disagree with you. Yes, we are, Steve. The information is, for many years, the information has found itself in the hands of government, in the hands of leaders, in the hands of corporations, in the hands of you name it. But look isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that Bill Gates, who is the second richest man in the world, is part of that game, or people like Oprah Winfrey, let's say, some of the richest people in the world. And that's what we're up against. The secrecy that is here, the secrecy involved in these multi-tiered global attacks, all right? Unreal.
Well, when you think about it,
Let me
go ahead, George. Steve, let George.
Forgive me.
Understanding is illumination. Is understanding uncovers all the criminal behavior. So to get at your last point, caller, that you said, what's it do to have all this information? Well, it does what Roxy said, and it also does. Everybody who's listening and everybody who listens to our propagations of this, the YouTubes and everything else and MP3s, it's waking people up. For us to know about it and to talk about it wakes other people up. And another thing it does is it leads to the understanding of the situation, and understanding always breaks down whatever horror was happening. Understanding is truth, and truth reigns over all. They can't fight it. No, but nothing can stop it. Nothing can stop logic and truth. And so that's what it does. It does a lot of good, even though, well, maybe you can't go stop chemtrailing from coming overhead. Getting on a radio program like this can do a huge amount and bring in new listeners and new people being aware and so on. And
yes,
sure,
I think
I
right,
learn,
George.
You learn, we all learn.
George, I think you're right, and I know you're right, and I'll tell you something. You know, when we first started a couple of years ago on Facebook, 2-3 years ago, I couldn't even get anyone to email me a photo of a chemtrail. No one even really knew what they were. And of course, you know, the joke of it today is now you can't stop people from it. And I also get what Steve, you know, the caller is saying as well, because once you open that door, it's a Pandora's box, if you will, but it's also a door to the subconscious. Once you get people talking about it, and yes, it can be really boring for me personally to see people just arguing and throwing all this barium and strontium and aluminum subjects around, and you know, it gets really cuckoo, and then everybody's fighting one another, blah blah blah. But those who have been in the movement, those who have the literature, those who have put together PDF files, those who have brought out of the woodwork that would have never been found by the public, documents such as Owning the Weather by 2025, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, give us a little bit of a break. Most of us have only been doing this for a couple of years, and we've come a far cry from 2011 to now. The awareness is there. So give us a little bit of a break, I would say. Give humanity a pat on the back, because this thing, they've been cooking up these schemes for 50 years. It's only taken us a couple of years to unravel at least part of it. So, you know, that's what I have to say, you know, and it's proof positive moving forward. There are those who are out in the streets, and they are going to Parliament, and they are going to the government, and they're not going to stop. So, Steve, there is a progression. It's happening quickly. And it's not only chemtrails, it's a multitude of
and so when someone like Steve, when someone like the caller goes out and gets really animated about burrowing in and unearthing who's doing what and what the sources are and who's saying, see, this just opens up more and more thousands and hundreds of thousands of people's eyes to it at all levels of society, where we may be hitting 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 levels of society, and then you get down among the workers that, you know, somebody's loading aluminum onto those planes, and all of a sudden they're waking up and becoming hip. So the work that someone like the caller's doing is vitally important, being what I just called it, a warrior. That's vitally important. I just can't do everything, so I work at where I'm sort of my area. And, you know, I wanted to make a point, though, Roxy, about, before we closed off, about the Vatican and the Roman Church, is they have one of the finest telescopes on the planet out there in your part of the country, and they named it Lucifer, right? So, you know, there's a lot going on with those people.
Oh yeah, it's pretty kooky. The idea that we are moving towards this whole awareness zone is, I think, you know, and I think that you agree with this, George. You know, there is a different approach. And I do see this. You know, this isn't the approach of the Vietnamese War, where people got out in the streets and really started fighting and beating each other up and throwing, you know, this is the movement. And I like to call it all under one umbrella of a movement. The global revolution movement is quite different. I think it's more subtle. Yes, we did see some upheavals in Occupy, when they got out in the streets, and of course on Wall Street, and you brought up a good point about Soros, funding the opposition and so forth and so forth. I mean, it's always going to be that way. That's called social engineering, and social engineering has always been in place.
Right.
The good news is that for the most part, and yes, people will argue back and forth and get all feisty on Facebook and I'm going to block you and, blah, 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 using all the Facebook funny terms and so forth. And you can get, but it's eliciting something. And what it's eliciting is it's opening up people to the idea that 9/11, going all the way back to Kennedy. I mean, there are some, I think it was Jesse Ventura that had mentioned, if you could prove that the assassination of Kennedy came from inside the U.S., it would be all over. And that was Jesse Ventura that said that, I'm pretty sure. Steve, did you have something to add?
That's effectively been proven, just nobody wants to believe it.
Mm.
Well, you sound real negative. I mean, I don't even know you. The caller, you sound like you have a very antagonistic, negative approach. That's okay. Just I don't need it. I'm not on that same level of. I'm at a lower level or whatever. I'm not.
Right. We've got to.
I don't mean to sound negative. I'm just high strung.
Yeah, you are. Well, smile and change your picture on Skype because you look mean. Change it to a smile, Steve, because I hear you're a really nice guy.
Yeah, put a smile on there with the sunshine.
Listen, I've got to take another call. You can hang in there with us, Steve, if you want to. There's a 313 call. Welcome to the Truth Tonight Talk Radio Show. What can we do for you? What's your name?
Hey, this is Lisa from Michigan.
Hi, Lisa from Michigan. Do you have a question?
Well, comment, question, yes, both. I'm TI from Michigan, and
what is a TI?
A targeted individual. Individual, okay. Victim of gang stalking and electronic harassment.
No.
And before I learned what a TI is and what was happening to me, I went to the church for help. I went to several, the Catholics, the Methodists, Christian, and one individual within the church. Well, none of the pastors would help me, but one individual within the church told me that I need to do some drugs. I need to do some drugs for some time period to get past what I'm going through. Now, she meant these SSRIs. She hinted to that I have to do some drugs in order to get through, get past what I'm going through.
Whoever you're talking to sounds just like a medical doctor, because, I went to MD, you go in there and you're slightly anxious or nervous, and that's the first thing they're pushing is SSRIs on you, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, Paxil, Prozac type drugs, and those are hallucinogenic drugs. They are hallucinogenics that change your. Yeah. So anyway, continue.
Oh, well, that was basically my comment. And I had actually been in the pharmaceutical field for on and off for some time, just basically working in a pharmacy. And I just been around prescription drugs, and I've noticed, the behaviors of some people who need several medications from wake up to go to sleep. They had maybe 20 different medications to the ones that were taking the SSRIs. And I've known some who just randomly take the Ritalin and the Adderall just to get through the day. And I couldn't understand someone like that, but I just knew that was part of some of the topics tonight, and I just wanted to make that comment on a member of the church. Let me go back to that. But a member of the church who told me I need to do some drugs just to get past what I'm going through as a TI, and that didn't make any sense.
That's just horrendous. I don't have demonstrable proof of this, but it's my understanding that once you're on an SSRI, you're basically on it for life. But I have some friends who have told me their mothers were on it, and they switched the drug, and then she started wanting to kill everybody or kill herself. And
yes,
I've read so many examples of that, and you're always sort of on it, even if they change your levels downward slowly. But over 95% of all the mass shootings in the United States in the last 20 years involved SSRIs. So
yes.
Well, and isn't that interesting that they were just going to pass a bill, with this gun law, and basically you could see what was coming down the pipeline, because isn't it interesting that the only big shootings involved SSRIs, psychotropic drugs and antidepressants. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing was going to be a level of a background check. And my thinking went straight to, wait a minute, if you're on any of these types of drugs, they're going to use that as an excuse to not give you a license to carry a defense, a gun. So you see, it's all one big sort of craziness. But Lisa, I'm glad that you opted out on that one.
Yeah.
I got out of that church and I've never gone back because I couldn't understand a church pushing drugs. That didn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think it goes back to what George was saying about who's really running the show, and if it is the Vatican, boy, think about this, people.
Well, it's well known also that the ministers across the United States are being subverted, and they're telling their flocks, their congregations, to go along with various aspects of these programs, and like giving up your right to bear arms, for example. And so that's the only thing. I mean, that's what comes to mind for when the caller mentions it would happen in a church, that the ministers are being subverted there by the same money and the same kind of people. So,
absolutely, Lisa. We've only got about 4 more minutes with our guests. So, was there anything else that you wanted to mention?
I just wanted to mention, keep doing what you're doing. That is it. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'll keep listening.
Well, you know what? You've got a deal.
All right.
We just made a deal over the air right there.
Yes.
Thanks, Lisa. You have a good night. Thanks for your interest in the show, and thanks for calling.
All right.
So, here we are back to, this big picture. And, George, I sure did enjoy you coming on the program tonight. We just took a walk, and it obviously really interested a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'm happy with, I'm thrilled with how many people are calling and in the chat and visiting, and new listeners coming in, and people who emailed me, and we have an old friend of mine, a special friend of mine, is taping to get a clean MP3 for us, and hopefully that'll all come out, and thanks to him. And I want to remind people to come to visit www.officialgeorgemcclure.com for all my music things. I have a new video up on YouTube. It's not a live video, but a new video of a song in my Playboy Swing album. It's called Mis Pensamientos. It's written in English and in Spanish. It's true Borderlands music. Excuse me. And it's what could loosely be called a corrido. It's a romantic corrido about the Tucson and northern Mexico area. And that's on YouTube, so you can listen to it. Mis Pensamientos means my thoughts. And let me see. And then for all things George McClure, you can go to www.georgemcclure.net. You can read the Journal of the Collapse. There's some new entries at the bottom, ones including Dr. Death and him, this guy trying to push SSRIs on me. Interesting that the caller was on the same topic, and that happened to me recently. And the connections between gun control and SSRI, like you brought up, Roxy. And also another article I wrote to the bankers. It's just a letter, and it's a summary. It's all the way at the bottom. The new entries on Journal of the Collapse are at the bottom, so you can go to that, scroll all the way to the bottom, and read that. And that's actually a letter I actually wrote to one of the big 5 banks in the United States, with whom I'm in sort of unpleasant.
Well, George, we're out of time, and we've got to get going. And we'll have the show for everybody later on tonight, and the video, and, of course, an article with all the information that you just gave us. And I want to thank you for your work, and thank you for taking the time to join us, and
my pleasure.
It's always fun. It's always fun. It's always a great conversation, you know what I mean? So, again, Thank you. George McClure was our guest this evening. You're listening to The Truth Denied Talk Radio. And I'm Roxy Lopez. Have a wonderful week. We do collapse of gold and silver prices. Gold is down more than $90 an ounce since Friday, a fall about 7%. The price drop comes on top of last week's 4.7% tumble. Silver prices tumbled 8%, or $24 an ounce, Copper is also failing. Interesting. The reasons for the plunge are linked to the recent rise in the stock market, the slow, steady improvement of the U.S. economy, and the recent strength of the dollar. Keep in mind, this is ABC reporting. Crude oil futures have tumbled on global markets, down to less than $89 a barrel for West Trade crude, the lowest price since December of 2012. For years, gold bugs have predicted economic apocalypse with hyperinflation and a collapse of stock prices. That simply hasn't happened, and many investors have given up on gold, shifting funds out of precious metals. Last week, the infamous Goldman Sachs issued a report predicting gold prices would tumble. They must have a crystal ball. More volatility is expected in the days to come. Before its news reported January 14th, 2013, we are living in the greatest debt bubble in the history of the world, and Wall Street has been transformed into a giant casino that is based on a massive web of debt, risk, and leverage. When that web breaks, we are going to see a stock market crash that is going to make 2008 look like a Sunday picnic. April 19, 2013, moneymarket.com reported a story entitled, "Could Gold and Silver Coins Become Legal Tender in Your State?" Well, guess what? Arizona voted yes. Confidence in the U.S. dollar is so low that 13 states are poised to recognize gold and silver coins as legal tender. Arizona is the latest state to make the move. Monday, the Republican-sponsored Arizona measure sailed through the House of Representatives 36-2. The bill moves on for another vote in the Senate, where it got its first nod February 28th in a 17-11 vote. Should it land on Governor Jan Brewer's desk, it's good as gold. Senator Chester Crandall of Arizona, the bill's sponsor, says the move is the logical thing for the state to do. Great. The bill doesn't mean residents will pay for groceries and utilities with coins. It's more of a backup plan that provides a lifeboat for Arizona so that we can construct Plan B when paper currency is no longer widely accepted. States considering similar bills include Colorado, Kansas, Idaho, Indiana, Missouri, Montana, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Virginia. But why are we doing this? My guests tonight, traffic listeners and readers, I want to thank all of you who are out there in Radio Land for making Revolution Radio number 2 on the internet for talk show, number 2. This is absolutely amazing. I want to thank our beloved, and I do mean this with all my heart, owner and builder of this Revolution Radio site, Mr. we call him Nighthawk. His name is Mike Wrigley, and I never call him Mike. I always call him Hawk because the man works around the clock. So thank you for giving us this opportunity, those of us who are broadcasting on Revolution Radio. All of the hosts are volunteers, and of course the owner is a volunteer as well. It is absolutely phenomenal, and it was because of all of you. We collectively all work together to make this number 2. So thank you so much. Now, before I bring on my guests, I just want to give us some reminders. Market Oracle UK, February 2013, said the central banks are finally in a crosshairs of focus for not producing a solution, more recently for worsening the problem. They have confused their function from providing liquidity in the belief that they are creating wealth. They have destroyed the system as costs rise relentlessly. Perversely, their efforts to dampen demand so as to reduce price inflation has added to the economic destruction. The outcome will be shocking in its power shift to the east, shocking in its evaporation of paper wealth, and shocking in the simplicity of the new financial structure that rises from the ashes based in barter and gold payments. However, the United States will be left behind due to its basic ownership of the global reserve currency being scrapped. The extreme corruption cannot be reformed. That's a very important line. The extreme corruption cannot be reformed. The U.S. financial system must be extinguished, and with it, extreme damage to the U.S. economy, which has been hopelessly dependent upon asset bubbles for 2 decades now. From the dollar collapse tabloid, they said the dominant explanation in the sound money community, at least, for the precious metals crash is sabotage. The metals exchanges were running out of physical product and faced imminent default, so the major governments, via their money center bank proxies, sold tens of billions of dollars of gold and silver futures contracts, forcing prices down and triggering stop-loss orders and margin calls that produce Monday's epic bloodbath. ABC reported on Monday that gold is at its lowest point since March of 2012. The biggest story on global financial markets is again, as Mr. George McClure will be speaking on these topics and more tonight, such as the collapse is well underway. How timely is this? Cyprus and what it means. SSRI's mass murder and poison prescription drugs. Walking zombies, what are they? Logical inconsistencies of the matrix and Western civilization. Who's really in charge? Understanding the pyramid. And of course, music, historical antecedents of American music in the West and Southwest. I want to welcome to the show one of my favorite people, actually, George McClure. George, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for taking the time from your busy schedule to come and chat with us.
Thanks, Roxy. Pleasure to be here.
So, George, you are known as a writer, a showman, and a spiritualist. Can you just give us a little bit of background of why? And, you know, I just want to say, last time that you were on the show, one thing I do remember about you that is endearing to me is that you don't. Oh, it's endearing. You don't call yourself anything. You're just a person on the planet, and that's something that I find really special. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
That I'm just a guy on the planet?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's how I see myself, and every now and then people have told me through my life, and I've had 2 careers, I suppose, but one was very short-lived in retrospect, 8 years, and then well over 20 in music. And once or twice somebody has said to me, but don't you ever look back and say, you know, what do you want to do when you were like a teenager or something, when you were 13, and think about where you are now? And I'm like, well, no, I don't ever do that. So maybe I just always look at things in a brand new way, in a brand new day. I'm not sure. There's a silver moon coming up tonight in Roxy. I remember last time we were on the radio, I was on with you, there was a big, fat, brownish, yellowish full moon coming up. And tonight there's a silvery moon, and it's a little earlier in the day. So, and I checked. I think it's going to be full in a few days. And on the Tzolk'in calendar, today's 10 Akbal, and that's Akbal is Akbahl, and that's night, Night, and house. This is sort of it's a spiritual calendar, sort of the calendar that keeps me in tune and us in tune with the natural world. Is what it does. So today is 10 Akbal on that calendar, and it runs from 1 to 13, because the natural cycle of things, the Mayans, the great super mathematicians, the Mayans figured out that, realized and, quote, discovered that 13 is a fundamental multiple of the universe. And we run on it as well. So the Tzolk'in calendar runs on days number 1 through 13, and then they start again. So today is the 10th day of that cycle. And then there's another cycle that runs in unison with it that's 1 through 20. Anyway, I wrote out on an email, it said be discussing a little bit about music and topics a little known and widely captivating. So that's what I'm shooting for. I don't know why I don't typify myself or categorize myself. It's unpleasant to me, to get back to your question.
Correct. Yes, and that's I find it wonderful. Actually, you just sort of you just are, and I love that you explained about. Well, it's like here in the West, it's like the first question when you're introduced to somebody who is a stranger. Generally, the first question is, "What do you do?" And basically pointing at a career of sorts, etc. And we define ourselves by our careers. And that's one thing that I like about you, is that you live outside of the box. And you are not defined by simple terms such as some of the great terms that you have been defined as by others who write about you. For instance, a writer, a musician, a spiritualist, etc. But whenever I talk to you, I realize that you are just you are all things.
Thank you. Yeah, I defy definition, but I don't go to dentists anymore. I told a friend of mine yesterday or the day before, I no longer can just put up with the unmitigated, unbelievable hypocrisy and lack of knowledge, and they're in there poisoning everybody with fluoride. You know that wash that they spray in your mouth when they work in your mouth, and she reaches in and goes, that spray is 200 times the fluoride level of drinking water. So they're literally killing your teeth when they spray that stuff in, to rinse your mouth. They say, rinse, please. And and if you swallow, they always tell you don't swallow it. Well, that's why, because it can kill you, But they want it on your teeth. And
isn't that interesting that they're putting something in your mouth, and your gums and your tongue and everything in your mouth is absorbing?
Revolution Radio proudly presents live from Phoenix, Arizona, the Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear about on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, nutrition, and conspiracy facts regarding your personal sovereignty. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
And a very good evening. Tuesday the 23rd of April, 2013. Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody there in the chat room. Be sure to ask your questions of the guest tonight. If you have any questions, if you're in the chat rooms or the event page on Facebook, if you're registered there. We had a little joke going on today because we had 357 people registered for the show this evening on Facebook, and I thought it was pretty funny, 357 Magnum. And so we kind of all made a joke about it. But anyway, my guest tonight is George McClure. He's going to be returning to, he did another show with us within the last year, I want to say. And George is phenomenal, so we're going to dive into some subject matters. And as usual, I have some commentary that I want to mention. First of all, if you want to look at any of the links for George McClure, you can see them in the chat room. The producer has put them in there. And he is also linked up at thetruthDenied.com. You can listen to the show on the player at thetruthDenied.com if you wish, or you can join the chat room at freedomslips.com and listen to the show live there. So very welcome to all of you. I also want to thank you for some of you who have been really paying attention and helping us out at The Truth Denied with some donations. I want to thank all of you who have been contributing to renewing our host sites and our domain sites. We really, really appreciate it. Up until now, we have been self-supporting, and of course, we've had a run-in with some big changes at Google, AdSense, and of course YouTube. So no matter what kind of traffic we're bringing in, and we have unbelievable traffic, and I want to thank you all for that. We have consistent 6,000 to 10,000 a day on The Truth Denied, and I want to thank you for that. And speaking of consistent